Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our second episode of Details, presented to you by Stardust Life-Centered Design. My name is Giselle Carr. I'm the founder and CEO of Stardust Life-Centered Design, and I'm excited to bring to you two speakers today to speak to us a little bit about technology and about how they have been applying technology to life-centered design. So specifically, the topic that we'll be approaching today is amplifying thriving in a global community. And this is to face the massive critical challenges that we face today, including climate change that are spread across multiple disciplines and borders. So when we consider the threat of climate change, it's biochemical and environmental in and of itself, but it requires solutions that involve communications, political changes, and technological systems. So really in this age of interconnectedness, is there a way to amplify positive change? That's what we'll be talking to our guests today about. So across these numerous boundaries, how could technology be harnessed to both support and propel positive change? What are the pathways to development of a future that is thriving for all of life, not just human beings, but also our ecosystems, nature, our economies? So in this conversation, we'll spotlight applications that emulate nature rather than oppose it, and also explore the benefits of scale in deploying solutions that address these complex challenges. So welcome to my guests. Jayashree Nagarajan and Lily Urmann. Absolutely thrilled to have you guys here.
Absolutely happy to be a part of it too.
Thank you. And just as a side note to everyone in the audience, none of us have met in person in real life. We've only met online. It's kind of a funny story. I've met both of them on social media somehow. Managed to meet Lily a few years ago in a shared group, a biomimicry group, global. And I met Jayashree earlier this year because she reached out to me on LinkedIn. And I'm just thrilled to have met both of them because they're so inspiring and we can't wait to share more about their work. So I would love to invite you guys to introduce yourselves. I guess we could start with Jayashree.
Sure. Thank you, Giselle, for organizing this. Very excited to be a part of this interesting initiative. To just say a few words about what I'm doing and the organization I'm a part of. I work with Tata Consultancy Services. We are an organization of 500,000 employees. And if I would quote it in my CEO's words, right? Every transformation and every innovation starts with a belief that we can make the world a better place. So that is what is the premises based on which we try to bring in the culture of innovation, bring in the culture of purpose-led transformation across the organization. Been in this field for 12 years now, having worked across multiple IT companies. So that is in short about me.
Awesome, thank you. And Lily, let's hear a little more. Oh.
Yeah, over to you, Lily.
Okay, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I'm pretty new to the field and have a company of 2 people that I just launched last year. I also just was thinking about this during the introductions, Giselle. Today's focus is all about kind of technology, and it's, I think, fitting that we all met on technology and that we're pursuing this and pushing and having these conversations on this platform and in this space that is online. So there's something to be said about that for sure. I'm a recent graduate of the Biomimicry Master's program at ASU. Well, I guess not super recent anymore. It was last May. And I also worked at the Biomimicry Center on the ASU campus up until about a month ago, where I transitioned out. And now I'm working full-time to launch my own company, Brilliant by Nature and NeighborNET, which is what I'll be talking about today.
Super exciting. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely true, right? Like technology has facilitated this amazing connection. Like in what world would you guys have met, you know? Yeah, I just feel very honored to be able to have both of you here because the different ends of the spectrum, there's something almost magical that happens. all of, I'm sure that there was a time when Tata was also one or two employees, like you just never know.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
we live in an age of exponential. So, you really just never know what could happen in these innovations.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exciting.
So I do believe that technology kind of helps us break barriers. And this is a fantastic example of that happening here, right itself.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay, so maybe you guys could share a little more about what made you decide to work in this industry, and like what was the genesis, what was the why that was driving you? I guess we could start with Lily this time.
Sure, yeah. So I guess I'll have to back up a little bit and tell a little bit more of kind of the start of the company that I recently launched or co-founded. My last semester of the master's program, I was really inspired by forest networks. And this actually goes back a few years. I had this idea, and Giselle and I talked many years ago, actually, before it was fully developed and before it even evolved into what it is now. But I was able to focus on the research and development in the last semester of my master's program because I chose to understand how forest networks build resilience in ecosystems after flooding and fires. How do species survive and come back and thrive in these ecosystems even after such destruction? And that was really motivating to me, especially as I was experiencing and seeing firsthand how my own communities and people I knew were affected by this increase in disasters around the globe from climate chaos. And so I was motivated and I asked these questions: how does nature, facilitate resilience? How does nature build resilience? How does nature share resources? Because those were the gaps, right, that I was starting to see and starting to notice. And that's what inspired me to launch this company. And actually one of my advisors, Giselle was one of my advisors, and then my other advisor, Aaron Butler, and I decided to take it to market. And so we founded this company called NeighborNET. And it's an app and platform website eventually that will help facilitate greater connection and communication in communities that are facing disasters. Specifically, just amplifying the power that's already in communities with this technological tool. And it's not developed yet. We're still in the early phases of talking to people and interviewing folks and prototyping, which is really exciting. But it's also terrifying, right? I'm not in the technological space usually. I have an undergraduate in environmental studies and the master's in biomimicry. I think my passion in community organizing helped push me into this space of, look, there's a need for something right now. I have some skills that can help me get there. I can bring together other people that have the rest of the skills that know how to do all of this. And I can help facilitate and create something impactful. And I think that's what keeps me motivated and keeps me moving. This is needed. And I have some skills that can help create it. So that's kind of what helped to get me into this tech space. And it is all very new for sure. So happy to be here for sure. But also like there's so much work to be done. And I think that's the thing too, of like, even when people don't think they belong in the tech space, or me like in the entrepreneurial space, I'm like, what am I doing here? I have to remind myself that actually, yes, I am an entrepreneur. I want to make this happen. I'm in the tech space now. I'm going to make this happen. And I have skills that will help me get there, and I belong here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, when you think about the scale of what we're trying to solve, right? The things that we face together, that's the beauty of technology. It's an amplifier and also an accelerator. It's helping us go from A to B, from one change to another. And the beauty of it is how quickly it can happen. And I think it's very much necessary. I think it's very much necessary for people who might be on what they think are the external of that industry to be in it, because I just can't see a way around solving these issues that is the old way. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
That is only that old way. So Jayashree, maybe you could speak to us a little bit about what drives you.
Absolutely. So of course, I started my career in technology. I've been in technology for a long time. And there was a reason why I got into this, If you look at the last decade or two, you can see that technology has been impacting human lives exponentially. So with every 5 years, every 3 years, you can see that it's not just about the adoption of technology, but the impact technology has. So traditionally, in most of the IT organization, there was a belief that automation or reducing efforts was always the key. So I wanted to be in a place where I could drive a positive change, where through technology, you could enable a change in the way people look at use technology, where it can impact larger lives. Because if you look at it, right, I mean, today we have, in past, if we look at the traditional systems, we could have probably spoken to people around us, met people in our cities. But now with technology, whether it's resources, whether it's knowledge, whether it is information, um, as well as various learnings can be spread so easily across. So that is primarily the reason I wanted to be in the field and try to nudge that change in whatever little way I can drive it towards positivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that, when you think of the role of it in the past versus now, I mean, it must have been so interesting the past 10 years. Oh my
Yes.
God.
So it's been a journey. So it's like seeing a child grow, right? You can see it being a very small influencer to it being something that globally impacts everything and anything. So it's been a pleasure to be a part of this field of work, and every day is a learning. Every day is something new that I learn. Very excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, it feels very much like, I mean, having worked in design management and strategic design, I would
Yes.
say about 10 years, it's interesting the way that collectively we've come to this place in the world where we've had to almost reimagine everything that we do.
Yes.
And there's no, you really can't do that slowly when you know that there's this
Yes.
deadline around climate change and there are these pressing
Absolutely.
concerns. So it's really fascinating to see how those things interact and see what comes out of it. So
Yes.
yeah. So I want to just dig a little deeper into some of the solutions that we mentioned before. Yeah. So Lily, maybe you could speak a little bit about what made you decide to create this technology-based platform. Maybe talk a little bit about what you feel that are some of the benefits of this startup that you've seen so far.
Yeah, and actually that you were just talking and it reminded me that I think there's also a really important and exciting area in the future of the intersection of technology and biomimicry. So my
Yes.
background and passion is in biomimicry, and to be done really well and really deeply, biomimicry takes a lot of time and a lot of understanding of the natural world. Bringing a biologist to the design table, Giselle, as you know, it takes effort, it takes a lot of time, it takes cooperation and collaboration. And I think there's a huge opportunity because it's not embedded deeply in technology on a wide scale yet. We're not there yet with NeighborNET, but it's something that motivated me as well when I was excited about understanding how forests function and then translating that to a technology that could help communities function in the face of a disaster. And so, I mean, a lot of what motivated me to speak on your question a little bit is seeing firsthand and talking firsthand to the people that we've been talking with over the last year when we were interviewing folks from around the world who've personally experienced disasters and failures in their community when something happens. Like on the East Coast when Hurricane Sandy hit, and then there was a snowstorm right before that. One of our folks was talking about how the power was out and nobody really had that network of understanding who had what and how to share their generators and who had potable water. And there's just some baseline like communication problems that happen in a disaster. And I feel like that's this point of there's opportunity in the biomimetic space because forests have been doing this for millions of years. How do we translate that into a technology? And I don't have all the answers yet, definitely, because that translation piece is really tricky to do well. So right now we're calling it like a bio-inspired idea because it's inspired by what happens in the forest. But ultimately, we want it to be biomimetic and deeply biomimetic in the way that even like the code in the back end would be inspired by the functionality and the design principles of the forest. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. And that's also what I'm really excited about, because like you both said, technology is in our future, regardless of how we apply it. We might as well make sure that it's impactful and meaningful and done well, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of the space where I'm in right now. And yeah, just the interviews that we've had with people from all over the world that have experienced disasters and been in those communities that you know, took weeks for government to come and provide aid. I was on Twitter yesterday and saw that in Louisiana, you know, there's military trucks that are blocking access to stores, and people are getting turned away from going to the store to get their supplies that they need from the military. So there's a downfall to our systems right now that are in place for disaster response. And I think they're overall getting better as we experience more disasters, but not quickly enough. And I think that there's a really important place for something like a technological tool, both software and eventually hardware, that can help people respond quickly and more efficiently after a disaster, just like our ecosystems around the world respond after disasters.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I really didn't know that there were all these that there were communications that could actually, you know, deter people from getting the assistance that they need. Like that's just mind blowing.
People, I mean, like you were saying, like we've been part of technology, and technology is such an ingrained part of our lives at this point. But there are also access barriers to technology, especially with older folks. And so that's something we're also thinking about, of like, how do people access the support that they need? Like when you're applying for money after a disaster and you need money to rebuild, that whole application on the government site is so complicated and hard to navigate, I'm sure. I mean, people know this. It's hard to get the support and help that you need in such an important time when you need it quickly, and you don't want to jump through 20 hoops to get the help that you need. So that's something of like, how do we make it accessible? How do we make it easy to access? And how do we make it kind of already ingrained? Like in nature, there's a, you know, a fungal network that's kind of already there, and there's that communication already happening before a disaster hits. And that's a big piece of what we're trying to translate, of how do we get people engaged in this app, at least on the back end, before something happens, so that network is already there and they're immediately connected to what they need and what's around them when the time comes.
Absolutely worthy. You know, I'm just thinking of, funnily enough, in the other conversation that we have, so the other series, there's a conversation around disaster resilience as well, but more from an architectural and urban planning standpoint. And some of the stories that emerge from that are things like people waiting 10 years to receive money after disasters. Yeah,
I'm not surprised. Yeah,
true story. People have waited a decade since some of these disasters. And I mean, there really is something to be said for the complexity of, you know, applying for the help and what is actually going to streamline those processes and make it easier. Because the other side of it is people being, you know, full of anxiety or angst or confusion while it's happening. So it's very much like you're saying, is having all the structures in place for things to move smoothly when it happens. Because I mean, if there's anything that we can predict, we can't predict where it will hit, but we know that things will happen. These things are constantly happening. So,
and it's not, I'm not saying that, just to throw this in there as the last thing too, I'm not saying that this technology will like necessarily solve all of our problems around disaster response. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's so many shortfallings and there's so many downfalls of the way that we do respond to disasters currently, that there's a lot of space to improve. And this can offer, at least if it connects people to, you know, other people in their area who are better at navigating those systems, or younger that know how to access the technology or whatever it is. That's kind of the space we're trying to fill. Of look, there's a lot that needs to happen. Here's one thing we can do to at least kind of build in that baseline connection network that is so needed.
Yeah, definitely. I see what you mean about not being able to solve everything, but you could still solve something, right? And
I mean, I am ambitious, but that would be
we all are. It's so
there's
true.
a lot to do.
Well, you know, I read once, and the quote never left me, is the idea that it's a crisis of opportunity is what our time is. Yeah, and I kind of always try to refer to that, you know, because it really is just at every point, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So Jayashree, like, I'm curious if maybe you could share a little bit about your experience at scale. So just pivot over to understanding a little bit more about your market on TCS in India, and just because you obviously have access to a whole different level of scale, and you know, you see things that
Yes.
we can't really imagine.
I was actually relating to what Lily was just saying, right? So when we talk about disasters, there is a lot of scope of change to happen there. And even when there isn't a disaster, even when we are at normal, there is also a lot of things that need change. So one of the things that we have been doing in our organization now, if you actually look at the technology field, right, being a technology company, um, we don't have a physical product. It will always, there might be platforms, but it will always be digital products. So for people to understand the impact that their digital products are having on the ecosystem, on the world at large, it's not very easy for people to understand that. So more than probably the challenges around getting the buy-in, or getting people on board, it's about the mindset changes. It's about the fact whether we are able to make people understand beyond templates and processes, and help them understand and be sensitive towards the impact that they can make through every single solution that they are bringing in place. So what we have been trying to do is we have been trying to incorporate these practices of thoughtful innovations in every product life cycle. So if I would just say my own department, there would be hundreds of applications that we ourselves are managing. So the idea is every product team understands and is able to live these values on a day-to-day life. We are still not there, it's still a long way, but through capability building, through incentivizing people across various gamification modes, we are trying to bring in this change in mindset, in culture. While apart from this, of course, we drive a lot of transformation projects. We drive a lot of not just internal but even external facing projects, where we try to influence change at the ground level. I think it still pivots back when we talk about scaling to bringing making people believe and understand and be sensitive towards the change that they can be a part of.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really hear you with that. And I think one of the things we've talked about in the past, Jayashree, is the fact that TCS, so many of its client base is B2B, so it's other businesses. And so they become hubs in a way of different kinds of change in their area as well. Like, it's phenomenal. Like, if you even think about how you could deploy positive change and within a network, I mean, it's like a dream scenario in a way, because you can have this particular purpose that moves through all these different networks. When I think about it, I just
Absolutely.
get super fascinated, because I also think about all the companies being like an extension of TCS, like all of these organizations, and it's pretty much every market, right? Like, it's all over the world.
There is a partnership that happens, and I do see that compared to 5 years back, whether we talk about TCS clients, whether they are domestic or international, they themselves are aware now of the
Mm,
fact that they have to be responsible. They have to think of a responsible solution and not just a cost effective solution. So that change has been very positive and very motivating. While yes, there is a cascading impact, and as exciting as it is, it's also responsibility. It's also
mhm,
responsibility to ensure that we are able to shape that change in a positive way, and we
mhm.
don't add to the burdens that world already has. So
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I hear that. I mean, it really is mind-boggling to think about scale in that way. But I mean, I feel like this sweet spot is someday, there'll be bio-inspired and biomimetic innovations deployed at scale. That, like, that's,
yes.
to me, that's like the access point of
Yeah.
the
It-
conversation.
It's
It's like,
already started in a lot of bits and parcels across the organization.
yeah,
What we are looking forward to, and we are also, in future, we will hopefully collaborate more on this, is to see how we can make that a common aspect that every product thinks of, on how they
yeah,
can learn from nature, how they can benefit from nature, and coexist rather than trying to disrupt it all the while.
I love that.
exactly,
So important.
exactly,
And that's, I
exactly.
mean, that's even like more than making something truly biomimetic, which can be really hard and really difficult to scale, is what we're finding in the biomimetic space right now, is just understanding what it means to be life friendly, right?
Hmm.
What does it mean to, like you said, learn from life, but also benefit life? Like if we're understanding and trying to translate these tools in the natural world, how can we make sure that the natural world is thriving in addition to us? And I think that's kind of this like underlying current that I'm seeing in a lot of biomimetic spaces that is scalable, more so than like throwing in the term biomimicry and going through the whole process, which is hopefully more accessible down the line, but it's difficult to do right now with less biomimics in the space, especially in technology, and especially like less people having those like deeper conversations of like, okay, how do we make this truly biomimetic? Because there's also a lot of like kind of surface level biomimicry stuff that's out there in media and stuff, and people are like, this is exciting, but it's not truly biomimicry. But underlying, how can we make it life friendly? And I think that's a more accessible and scalable and understandable kind of like across the board. And that's sometimes like something I'll throw out instead of like truly biomimicry.
Yeah, I totally hear you because I know it's a, I mean, it is a emerging discipline in many ways, and it's still perceived as niche, even though nature is like all around us. It's like, okay, there's
Yeah.
trees, we have, you know.
Yep. And people have
Isn't
been
that
doing
ironic?
biomimicry forever. Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah,
ironic in a way that, nature is all around us, but we still have to be reminded to look at it, to learn from
this
it,
is it. This is
And
it.
that's also like, oh God, this could be a whole nother conversation of like, how do we understand the natural world and then apply it to our built environment, especially in technology that can be seen so separate
Yes.
from the natural world?
Yeah.
And that's something that really inspires me too, because I mean, half the time I'm like, I need to put all my technology away and go into nature and be with nature in order to like, build that wellness and build in the calmness and get that kind of biophilia aspect of it. But on the other hand, technology is so interwoven in our lives and we're not going to be going away from it anytime soon. How do we build in more of this inclusive, meaningful, impactful space that is inspired by nature and like benefits nature within the tools that we already use? And I think that's a really exciting area too that I could talk about forever, but I'm not, I won't take up any more time.
I know what you mean. But it's
Yeah.
true, we always have to remind ourselves, right, that we are nature, we're all part of it.
Yep.
True, like
Yep.
I have some pretty heavy boundaries around that too. I'm always like, okay, switch the phone off,
Yep.
put it in a drawer in another room, I am that person for sure,
Yeah.
But when you really look at life, like, when it dawned on me, there was something I read about, well, it was about the prevalence of design actually. But if you try to think of anywhere that you've been where you don't see signage, because signage is an indication of design constantly,
Mhm.
right? So like
Mhm.
there's man has touched pretty much everything. Humanity has touched pretty much everything. And it's
Mhm.
just understanding how we could have a healthier relationship
Totally.
with everything that we've touched and everything that we're now discovering.
Yeah. And moving forward, it's going to become
Very
even
true.
more prevalent. How do we make sure that it's, a
Yeah.
healthy relationship
Very
Yes.
true.
for us and the
Yes.
planet?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so we're coming down to our last few minutes. So I just want to maybe, switch gears a bit and ask you guys about any suggestions you have. Any ways in particular that you've overcome challenges, advice that you might give to someone who might be coming up in this field or who might be, inspired to do something like this, but not sure where to start. So maybe speak to how you've overcome some challenges in developing solutions. So I'll give it over to Jayashree.
Sure, sure. Why not? This is probably one of my more favorite parts because I also collaborate a lot with academia, and it's always interesting to demystify the complex terminologies, demystify what people think is a niche thing. What I would say is to simplify things in life. We always believe that if it is technology, or even people who are in technology believe that biology is very complex. So we always think things outside our boundaries are complex to understand. If it's broken down to simpler terms, simpler outcomes that all of us are any which ways trying to achieve, there is a better cohesiveness in how people collaborate together. So that, for example, if instead of saying that I want to build something using IoT, and another person says that I want to really understand the neural networks of how things are happening, if it is simply said that we want to impact a positive change, things become easy and they know that they are working towards the same objective. So I have always believed, and I would recommend that whether we look at our own lives or the problems we are trying to solve, or even the change we are trying to make, if we can just simplify things, or at least communicate it in a simple way, a lot of challenges are overcome simply by that.
I love that. It's so true. And I would definitely say the same thing, especially with biology and biomimicry, global challenges, climate chaos, disaster response. How can we simplify it? How can we make sure everyone at least knows what they can contribute and understand how they can contribute? Because that's the only thing that's going to create change. Not one person doing it 100% right, but millions of people doing it incorrectly, and as much as they can do, even if that's, less for some people. And I would definitely say the challenges that I've faced are just definitely entering a space that I'm unfamiliar with. And I think my advice for people that are doing that, especially if they're interested in biomimicry or technology, is to have conversations with people. There's so many really knowledgeable, really awesome people out there, like Giselle and Jayashree, and so many other people that I've talked to over the past year when I'm learning how to start a company and what direction we want to go, is having conversations and reaching out to your network and talking to people, and also doing the scary things. Sometimes, like, starting a company is terrifying for me, but I also know that I need to do it and it's going to create change, and I'm doing what I can in the space that I love. And so that's also a big piece of advice, is just finding the space that you're excited about and you're motivated in, and things that you're good at, and how you can contribute as much as you can.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, this is both. And you know what I like about these two pieces of advice? They're very actionable. They're very actionable. I think a person who might be running a business and thinking about a million things is probably just like, right now when they hear what you both just said. Yeah, very actionable. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, ladies. This has been a really enlightening conversation, and refreshing and energetic, but also just very accessible. Like, I actually feel, in a sense, that it feels simplified to me. It feels more normal for me. I feel easier about approaching technology in this way and thinking of it this way. It doesn't seem so insurmountable when we actually just get together and, share ideas. We'd be surprised at the things that emerge. So that's how I feel. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Giselle, for facilitating this.
Absolutely. It's been very enriching discussion, and thank you so much for hosting it, Giselle.
Oh, most welcome. It's really a privilege. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.